Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, government is under pressure to find a solution to the theft of cable and other forms of metal from public infrastructure. It's costing South Africa billions of rands. Now, this morning, Trade and Industry and Competition Minister Ebrahim Patel will brief Parliament on the draft policy proposals on scrap metals. To talk about what the government can do to fight cable theft, we're now joined by Professor Miriam Altman, an economic advisor as well as member of the National Planning Commission. Professor, good morning and thank you very much for your time. You know, I must say the damage caused by theft of scrap metal and cable is honestly enormous, and it's commendable, some might say, that they're moving swiftly with this draft proposal. But let's unpack some of the draft measures there. As a start, what do you make of the proposed 6 months export prohibition on scrap and waste metal?
Well, I wonder if I can just back up a little bit. There is a problem that constitutes probably more than 1% of GDP. And there's some level at which theft of copper and steel out of the system, and not only those things, but copper and steel is undermining infrastructure delivery, the economy. We see that, you know, in so many ways, it's damaging the economy and making infrastructure delivery almost impossible. So one would think that you should be strengthening policing, because I'm sure that question has to come up. And I'm just trying to come to the 6 month question. It's very hard to police 500 kilometers of rail and electricity lines effectively when you've got this kind of problem and thousands and hundreds of thousands of sites. Yes. Of location. So what government's trying to do, I think I just need to come back to what the principle is before we dive into a detail, if that's okay. So what government is trying to do is it's trying to say, okay, of course we've got to strengthen policing of these areas, no doubt, but that isn't going to solve this scale of a problem. So what they're wanting to do is they're trying to focus in on areas where there could be success, which is more on the logistics of scrap metal. Of where this problem lies, on the distribution and on the logistics of trade, and on focusing on organized crime and and what you could call offender-based strategies. So, for example, starting to strengthen money laundering, you know, making it harder to do it and making it less economically viable
yes,
for criminals.
Yes, yes. So they're cutting off the demand here.
Yeah, so they're trying to strip out the economic benefits of doing it, and then down the road strengthen the ability to go after criminals through intelligence and prosecutions and so on. So that's the context for that. So now the 6 month ban needs to be understood within a suite of proposals that are made in the DTI's recent. And the DTI's proposals are not the only thing that's happening around this, but it is a very important intervention. So what they're saying is we would like to ban the export of scrap metal for 6 months until we can get a grip on the problem, and then we will be followed by an enhanced permit system.
Yes. So this is phase one.
Proposal.
Yes, correct. So phase one is to cut off the demand. They're going to ban and then regroup and come up with a permit system, as you say. And this will be that introduction. Right. It's the permit system for export of scrap metals. And then there's also that amendment of regulations under the Second-Hand Goods Act to sort of impose more rigorous regulations, which means that they're saying what we're wanting to see is that the buyers have got to ensure or satisfy themselves of the source of that scrap metal that is being sold to them. So, I mean, one would have thought that on its own should have been a starting point, that no matter what, you should have had buyers that are inquiring and asking, where did you get this cable? Why was that not happening?
Well, you know, easier said than done. You know, just even tracing diamonds, which are a little bit more unique, is a very difficult thing to do. Tracing metal effectively is a very difficult thing to do because, you know, it gets melted down, it gets merged. There's all kinds of things that happen that end up mixing illegal scrap with legitimate scrap, I guess you could call it. So it's easier said than done, and the reality is that there are requirements for reporting, but they're not quite where they need to be. And the problem is so out of control at this point that I think that they're feeling that they've got to clamp down and stop the flow. It's not stopping the demand, it's stopping the flow of scrap metal out of the country for the moment.
Would you say, though, that was a better route to take, to say we're going to place more burden or responsibility on those that buy? Because here it seems some have said they were driven by greed. They didn't really want to find out where some of those that were selling them the scrap metal had actually gotten it. It was purely that. But now, if there might be punitive measures that are imposed on them, then it forces them to say, no, I want to know where you got that scrap metal.
Well, who knows if people actually know where they're getting it or not? Maybe they do know. You know, the point is, it certainly will make industry more vigilant. I think there's no doubt about that, because there will be a great economic interest in having this ban lifted, I would have thought. So I would think that the partnership between government and the private sector and the cooperation and the ability to strengthen these monitoring systems, I would think that the industry will get galvanized to ensure that it happens effectively.
Professor, thank you very much, though, for your insights. That's Economic Strategy Advisor, Professor Miriam Altman. To the story.